I actually love what I'm doing something beneficial for society.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
Welcome to another episode of Island Influencers. This week's Island Influencer is Bettina Roth, Chief Executive of the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority. Bettina has an extensive background in the financial services industry, boasting a wealth of international experience gained from her impressive career in both the regulatory and private sectors. With a strong track record of professional achievement, Bettina has held senior positions in various jurisdictions, including the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, Abu Dhabi Global Market, and the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. With such an impressive background and accolades, Bettina Roth is undoubtedly a leader in financial services. Her appointment as CEO of the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority came at a pivotal stage in its development, as the organisation strives to protect consumers, combat financial crime, and maintain confidence in the financial services sector through robust prudential supervision. During our conversation, we delve into Bettina's insights and gain a deeper understanding of her vast experience. We explore her remarkable journey, discuss her vision for the future, and uncover valuable insights into the world of financial services regulation. Additionally, Bettina aims to inspire other women to pursue senior roles and continue spearheading innovation within the Isle of Man's regulatory landscape. So here is my conversation with Bettina Roth in episode 93 of Island Influencers. So I'd like to welcome you, Bettina Roth, to my recording today of Island Influencers. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on this podcast, because we work in the same financial services sphere, although you're completely different to me, being the head of our regulator here in the Isle of Man. So I'm really thrilled that you've agreed to come on. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So Bettina, if I may, I'd very much like to know all about you, where you come from and your career to date, and how you ended up coming to the Isle of Man in your current position. So where are you from originally?
Sure. I grew up in Munich, Germany, and really the international part of my journey started right after high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, career-wise.
Sure.
And I decided to do a gap year. So 1 year as an au pair in Switzerland, in Geneva.
Really? Gosh.
To learn French.
Okay. Did it work?
And it did work. Not only did I meet my future husband, Canadian husband there, but equally I got the taste for different cultures, learning new things, just sort of that not ordinary. And when I went back to Germany, and my parents convinced me that I still didn't really not want to know what I wanted to do. And they said, well, an accountant is something really useful. You can have your own firm, you can work for a firm, you can do part-time, you can do a consulting, you can do everything with that. So I said, in the absence of that, why not? So I actually took an apprenticeship, which is quite common in Germany, for 18 months with a tax consultant to see if I would like that. And after that, so you do sort of the bookkeeping, and then you do financial tax returns and things. I definitely knew that I wanted to go to university and actually become, if anything, a tax consultant versus, just being somebody who keeps books. Yeah. Because it's a lot of routine. You do the same thing over and over.
Yeah, sure.
So even then I realized I wasn't somebody that would be really good at doing always the same thing.
Yeah. And I suppose that the course gave you an idea of what sort of breadth and depth there was for that career.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, I had my Canadian husband. So I said, well, if I start university, I could equally go in Canada to university. So I moved there, and
so you're pretty serious at this point.
At this point, I was very serious already, and I started university there, and we got married, and and then I worked with one of the big 4 firms in Canada.
And did they support you through university as well? Did you sort of get an internship, I suppose, with them, or
no? So that it was just a new start, basically. And to be fair, I worked part-time at a library, but there's no time really, when
No.
and English was my second language, so in the beginning you have to even figure out, I'm not even really sure what these people are talking about, so it does take a little bit of time to get used to that.
I'm sure. So how did he end up being how was he in Switzerland in the first place?
He did his master's in international relations. There's actually an American university that he attended, so that's how we met, through friends. So,
right.
So quite unusual, but as I said, it worked out well, and then equally he liked clearly, because as I said, he studied in Switzerland as well, he liked the international angle as well.
Yeah, sure.
And then shortly after I had qualified as chartered accountant, we went to Australia for secondment with my firm. So that was great as well. So we spent 18 months in Sydney.
Did you? Gosh. And what
it's
was
lovely.
Yeah, was it? Yeah. Yeah, so apart from the weather, I mean, what was it you really liked about Sydney?
Well, they and I don't know if it's the same still, they have a fantastic lifestyle. They work hard during the week, but by 4:30 on a Friday, it is the pub crawl, and you have to, it was work people, like everybody meets at the pub for that, and people have a weekend, and there's lots of sports.
Yeah, it's very outdoors,
really
isn't
outdoors, and just a fun culture. And so we actually, we had a hard time to decide to not stay there, because it's
right.
fabulous.
Yeah. And so had you specialized in your career at that point?
So no, as I said, I was actually looking at still staying in accounting and with the big firms. We made, for family reasons, we decided that, as I said, Australia is far from his parents, far from my parents. So I actually moved back to Germany for me to see if, what I wanted to do there.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't for us, especially for my husband, very difficult to, different language, different culture. So it was not ideal. So we didn't stay there.
Whereas you're learning English more and more as you go.
I was already fluent.
Yeah, but in an Australian accent or
exactly. So it was more tricky. And to be fair, at the time, Germany was much more homogeneous. Now it has changed as well. It's very multicultural. But this is so many years ago. It was quite difficult to get adjusted. And he was missing the North American sports as well.
Oh, okay.
We moved back to Canada to start a family.
And is this East Coast or West Coast?
Toronto.
East
Coast. And a friend of mine who I knew from my time at the accounting firm, she said, "Oh, have you ever considered the regulator?" I had never even heard. And this was before a banking crisis, so it wasn't really common knowledge that banks, and other financial services were regulated. And she said, it's really interesting. It's just like audit, but it's fantastic because you have the law behind you. And I said, well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. And ever since then, I've been a regulator just in many different jurisdictions.
Yeah, I was checking you out online before, and you've been to a ton. You've been.
It's my 8th jurisdiction here in the island.
So Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It's interesting as well. It has a lot of similarities with the Isle of Man in terms of size of population.
Yes.
The Isle of Man is a bigger landmass, but in terms of the population, very similar.
You went there during the hurricane, were you?
Well, no, luckily after the big, they always have hurricanes.
Yes.
The big one I wasn't there for,
the one
because
that flattened it.
Really flattened it.
Yeah, it did.
And people still speak about that, so it still has had an impact.
Yeah,
and there are certain buildings that are still not rebuilt. But it was interesting because very similar, issues and challenges as well. A small jurisdiction and how do you make it work? And again, financial services is a big contributor. So how do you make sure you balance, really supervising well versus the well-being of the economy as well? So there was a lot of similarities that I took away from Cayman.
Yeah, and so where did you? So you went from, at Canada you started. Then where did you go first?
So I started regulatory in Canada. Yeah. Then we went on a secondment for the U.S. So I lived in New York for a year, supervising with the OCC, the Office of the Controller of the Currency, Citibank. So very interesting after the financial crisis.
Yeah.
Then
that was post that crisis.
Yeah, that was. So I remember it was the first resolution plan that Citibank had drawn up, and it was over 1,000 pages, and we, across all the different agencies in the U.S., we were divvying up the different parts and how do we work together with different agencies to review, such a big document and how do you make sense of it and what are the improvements needed. Yeah,
because obviously it was broken, so it needed fixing and a fresh pair of eyes, I suppose.
And as I said, obviously, new rules after the financial crisis, which is interesting. Again, now we're talking about rules again.
Yeah, we are. And I suppose the recent banking wobble.
Yes.
What do you think were the learnings from that?
So I think the Federal Reserve is doing a deeper dive in terms of, I think the initial one, they did feel that the loosening of some of those regulations that were put in after the crisis were part of that. But I think equally when, and I can say that because I've been a regulator for that many years, when you have a number of flags, as SVB had, you would think, forget the rule set, but as a regulator, you look at those flags and you work with the institutions, to change that and mitigate that. So I don't think it's the only reason is, regulations were too lax. I think I would hope that there's a little bit of thought as well in terms of how they can do better. And maybe it's staffing levels, you never know. But
more diversification of client base or...
Because those are, bread and butter things. And the significant growth that it had. That's a flag by itself, because your controls can't grow as quickly as as your clients are. So I think there were some things that probably can be done better in future.
Yeah. So after that fascinating year in New York, was it? Where did you go then?
Back to Canada, and then we said, okay, I've now been with the Canadian regulator for a long time.
Yeah.
And a headhunter called me and said there's a new financial center in Abu Dhabi, if I was interested in that. And I said, I think I am.
That would be very interesting.
I think the only worry was, brand new, and obviously, in the Middle East as a woman, as a senior woman, that was sort of, the question mark for me.
Yeah.
But we took the plunge, and it was a fantastic experience.
Oh, I bet.
I was quite impressed generally with how forward-looking and really future-oriented the Middle East is, and what they're building there. So it was a really good experience, and being a greenfield. They just said, because we wanted to do things obviously automated and very
if we were starting
very
today,
innovative. Exactly.
What would we do now? Yeah.
And that was great. And I really got into new platforms, building things out, as I said, from scratch.
Wow.
and doing it the way, as you said, we should do right, if we didn't have legacy systems and ways, and being very, growth and innovation minded, which I love there. And they're fully supportive of that.
Were you able to take a lot of that learning from there to your other following roles?
I did, yeah. So when I moved to Cayman, same thing. I worked very closely then with our IT folks and said, no, especially because it's a very large financial center, the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
So we got to automate. I had over 100 banks. You can't look at everything, even with a big team. It was a big team. You have to actually do innovation and look at platform and saying, how can we do exception reporting and systems that will look at flags.
Yeah. Oh, no, interesting, fascinating, and it makes sense from a lot of things that I'm seeing coming through from our position as a regulated firm. You can see a lot more automation happening there.
Yeah, it's a good journey that we're on, but it takes time.
Yes,
to be fair,
no,
it's not something that happens overnight.
Yes,
but
evolution.
I think we're doing quite a bit of
evolution, not revolution. Yeah, got it. So after Cayman,
so again, a headhunter contacted me and said, "What do you think about the Isle of Man?"
Amazing.
And I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about the Isle of Man."
Where?
And I did have to just double check on a map. But obviously the role as chief executive was, so interesting. And again, in terms of what the island is trying to do, that
no, it's fascinating.
I took the opportunity, and I'm loving it.
Great. And what particular aspects of it have you found, I suppose, A, most challenging, and B, most inspirational?
Well, maybe to start with the inspirational. I really like how the island is collaborative. Not every island or small jurisdiction is necessarily the same way as the Isle of Man. Between all the stakeholders, if it's industry, between government, I find the authority and myself, we collaborate really well together. And it's so lovely, whoever you speak to, everybody really has the best in mind for the island. Yeah. And that is a strong motivation for people to saying, can we devise, what can we change, what can we adapt, what can we do to do right by the island. So that's really wonderful. So I'm enjoying that. I'm working quite closely, as I said, with Department for Enterprise, but across really all the stakeholders to make sure that we do smart things and we work well together and drive forward that innovation and that well-being for the island.
Most challenging, I suppose?
Most challenging, budget constraints. I think that goes the same for everybody. That we are a small authority. Obviously, we have a budget and we'd like to do more things, but you have to be realistic in terms of both, as I said, from budgetary perspective, but then equally even bandwidth. Like we touched on innovation. Even if I had a little bit more money right now, the bandwidth for the organization, we can't actually absorb more change, and we don't have the bandwidth to do more. So it is that evolution.
Yeah, but I suppose for the benefit of our listeners, it's important to understand the funding model now for this for the regulator, and that you're not dependent or you're independent completely to government.
So that has been quite a big project. A number of years ago, 2020, it was decided that the authority should be independent of government when it comes to funding. Just for background, up to April of this year, it was really 50-50. 50 was 50% of the funding for the authority came from industry, 50% actually from government. Yeah. So that is quite unusual in the international space. It should be, the industry that funds you. For example, the IMF and the World Bank, they do expect that. They expect independent funding.
Sure.
And so we are now on the journey. So Tynwald has approved the legislation. So April 1 was the first year we have increased fees. And over the next, I know industry has noticed that.
Yes, we've noticed that, yes.
And we understand it. It's a big change. But the good thing is that we're staggering it over 3 years, and I think that is helpful because obviously that is a big change, but very, very important for the island to make sure we're in line with international expectations, and then equally, it does make sense that the industry that we regulate funds us, and again taxpayer funds. There's so many worthwhile initiatives that the money is needed for, that it shouldn't really fund the regulator.
No, sure. And what do you think of the sort of the investment landscape for retail investors over here right now? I mean, is it from our perspective? I suppose was a major transition in 2013. The Isle of Man brought in our version of the RDR, the Retail Distribution Review, and what that meant was that in the UK anyway, commission was banned, and advisors had to be increased in qualification to minimum level 4. Which is the diploma level, and I guess if you compare us to we're ahead, if you like, of I don't know if Guernsey ever brought it in, but certainly Dublin still haven't brought in an RDR. I know advisors over there are struggling with non-qualified advisors still knocking around, and I just wondered how you felt, because we had an initiative a while ago to do a regulatory sandbox, wasn't there? There was that sort of initiative. I just wondered if there was any kind of silver lining to clouds anywhere that we could see more choice.
So we have a regulatory sandbox, and it really is for innovative firms, ideas that don't squarely fit into our rule book. We have a firm currently in that sandbox. It is a stable coin, and again, you work very closely with the firm to make sure that they can innovate and do things differently, but at the same time, we spend a lot of time on that because we want to make sure we minimize, consumer impact and make sure that there's nothing that is too risky. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Difficult though, isn't it, when you've got the who is classed as a retail investor, which is most people unless they work in investments, and many people we came across this a long time before you were here. Professional, the woolly the definition of a professional investor.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's still being kind of well scrutinized, if you like.
True, and to be fair, I think that's that will always be the issue. I think where it's helpful is generally the awareness and outreach for any investor, if it's retail or professional, I think has increased. That both in the UK as well here on the Isle of Man, where there's, I think, better understanding and more information out there, even let's say for retail investors.
Yeah.
And that investors are asking the right questions. Exactly. Is somebody qualified? Is it a reputable firm? Is it regulated? So those are things I think that has helped sort of the international discussions, or again, when we hear of something that maybe hasn't gone well in other jurisdictions, that I think that really educates investors.
Absolutely. So important, isn't it?
And make sure that they're looking for, quality firms and good proposals that they take advantage of.
No, good. No, it's the Isle of Man regulator has been, your predecessor Karen, and now you. It's been really heartening to see how the regulator's been so forward thinking in this sphere. So it's well, thank you from our perspective in any case. So this is a fun question for me to ask you, Bettina, because obviously this is my day job, not as a podcaster really, but when I meet people in my role as a financial planner. So what was money for you like growing up, in Germany, and when you were a child? So your earliest memories of money, and I suppose how you are with it these days, given your things you may have learnt from your mum and dad.
So I mean, money wasn't really discussed. We were comfortable. My parents were comfortable. So I couldn't recall my earliest memory. I had to think back, but I was still quite small when my grandmother actually mentioned that she would give me extra allowance if I tidied up my room each week. And there would be, so I definitely took advantage of that. And so I think that was helpful. And to be fair, when you grow up in a very conservative and frugal family, I think I had good spending habits, right from the start. But once I started in that apprenticeship, the tax apprenticeship that I mentioned, and you work hard, the entire month. And then at the time, I remember it was, I got 600. That was still marks. That wasn't even euros. So that's under £300 for the month.
Yeah.
And I thought, my God.
I remember that.
That's really not a lot of money.
Yes.
But that helped, because otherwise, you just get an allowance and you have your parents that look after you. So that was probably a game changer for me. And then equally, when I first started in my career, obviously, starting salaries are not significant. And I always had very good habit in terms of making sure that you put money aside for the rainy day.
Yeah.
And then equally, but once I raised my kids, that was the same thing. Like, you have to be frugal, and they would have their little allowance. And if they wanted something, I would say, like, I'm sorry, you want to spend your allowance on that, but I'm not paying for that. So I think it's very important. And I think now there's much more in terms of financial education early on. And I've volunteered at
Junior Achievement.
Yeah, so I did that in Cayman, and I think back in Canada as well. And
it's fabulous. It's a fabulous thing to do, isn't it?
Great. Yeah. And I was actually surprised in Cayman. I was surprised that. And maybe because, again, small islands are more entrepreneurial than bigger jurisdictions.
Maybe have to be.
The kids in grade 5,
yes,
they ask great questions. And again, you could tell that their families had businesses. So they asked almost business questions, and again, saving for university, and really probably a lot more advanced than you would see in larger jurisdictions at grade 5. So I was quite impressed with that. So it's really important to start early and have those good habits, because they will serve you well all your life.
No, that's a good answer. Thank you. So all of the things that you've done throughout your life so far, what's given you the most fulfillment, Bettina?
I think I'm I call it lucky. Maybe lucky is not the right word, but I'm fortunate that I love my job. Because when you talk to most people, they don't really say that. They say, well, I make good money, or, oh yeah, it's okay, or something. But I actually love what I'm doing. And I think part of that is doing something beneficial for society. Like, I'm a person that could not work in those industries that are, detrimental to people's values. Not to pick on tobacco, but it just wouldn't be for me. I'm very, very happy that I can do something that helps a society, an island, as I said, to be in good financial standards. And then, as I said, the other part is to have an interesting job that every day is different.
Fantastic.
There's always new things, new issues, new challenges, maybe new solutions. So I like being challenged.
Oh, that's a wonderful answer. Talking of being lucky, my son tells me that luck is where opportunity meets preparation. I think that might be from Ted Lasso, actually, but
it's great.
Yeah,
and I've said that before, because it's absolutely that. And I think sometimes exactly when good things happen to good things happen to good people, but you don't see any of the prep work, you don't see any of the hard work, and then people saying, "Oh, you were lucky, you were in that position, or you got that job," and it's like, exactly.
No, I get it.
Luck is not necessarily what that is.
And so, for any existing or aspiring entrepreneur, organization leader, business owner, what would be your number one tip?
Be bold. You have an idea, you have a business model that you believe in. So really, try to drive that, work hard at that. Having said that, have backup plans. As I said, a lot of times in Cayman, again specifically, people would continue to have their day jobs, and then have their, a firm on the side, for example, or try to build something out. So I do think that you have to be realistic how, quickly it became successful. And equally, I had a colleague in Cayman that said, she was trying to set up her business, and she wasn't sure, if it was viable in terms of making as much money as currently fully employed. And I said to her, well, try to find out, what is the minimum that you need. So is it a 60% that you have to achieve with your business? And that really helped her, because, as I said, I think it's very difficult to walk away from a full-time job into, being an entrepreneur without really knowing how much you need to support, your family and your lifestyle. So that was very helpful to her. So really think through, what do you think the business model is, and then do the analysis. Is that something that I can afford? Because I think people underestimate how long it takes to get a business up and running, and equally, what costs are, and you might have an issue with your roof, or your car breaks down and you need a repair on that. So you just have to make sure that you're being very smart about that.
Yeah, it's always very easy to spend money, isn't it? But it's not so easy to make it.
Yeah.
Many jurisdictions you've been in and moved around, and so what do you do to relax? What's the sort of, is there a common thread to that? Or
yes, I mean, anything. I think that here we're so lucky that nature is all around us. So I walk to work, which is fantastic. So no long commute for me. I just walk in the beautiful sunshine, 10 minutes. And so we do try on the weekends to do coastal walks, be out and about, because it is wonderful, and it does re-energize you and rebalance you. So I do try to do that.
Very good. And what do you think of the best things are about living in the Isle of Man?
Yeah, it's people are very friendly. It's a great community, as I said, close to nature. I think people really know and appreciate what we have here. If you think about clean air, for example, in the Middle East, as lovely as it is, but the air quality between the sand and the petroleum in the air and the heat,
right.
it's actually it's not healthy. So a lot of respiratory issues.
Really?
So here, when we breathe this wonderful, clean sea air, we're very lucky. So those things that sometimes maybe people that are here wouldn't even think of.
No, that's right.
Or if you think about Beijing or New Delhi, people have masks on, and not for COVID, but really for air quality. So we're very lucky. Very lucky.
Yeah. And I mean, we touched on some of your challenges, but what would you say the main challenges are the Isle of Man faces? Again,
I think for small jurisdictions, it's very tricky. there's so many across, all different sectors and industries. You have to have everything covered. You have to have an airport. You have to have infrastructure. You have to have, good healthcare. And the revenues that come in obviously are small because, we are a small island. So it's really tricky to saying where the finite resources that we have, how do we best deploy that? And I think it is difficult.
Yeah. Are there any particular opportunities that you could see?
So I think the consultation for the work permit, I think is a great step in the right direction.
It is, isn't it? It's an excellent opportunity
to look at, because we want to grow the island again. Professionally active people to come to the island, and I think work permits is a big part of that. So I think that will be very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. What have you got planned next here at Regulator Towers? What's big on the horizon here?
Well, it's we're still executing our current strategy, but that is for 2021 to 2024.
Yeah.
So very shortly, and we already started to kick that off with the board of directors in terms of what will our strategy be 2025 and beyond.
Okay.
So we're working on that, and of course I will have to talk about Moneyval AML prep that has already commenced. But as I said, at the end of the month we should get a more definite answer of when exactly the review is, but our best estimate is it's early 2025, and that is just around the corner.
A lot of work, isn't
so
it?
A lot of work,
yeah.
And equally, for industry, because it's not just to make sure that our technical standards are there and we have the regulations, but that industry is with us and really has that compliance and that mindset.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we're moving on now to some more fun questions.
Sure.
Are there any books that you've read recently that you'd like to share with our listeners as being a good old source of inspiration, or even just a good old read?
So one of the people that inspire me is Carla Harris. She's a vice president at Morgan Stanley of Wealth Management, and she's also an author. So her latest book is called Lead to Win. And what I think is fantastic about her, she also sings gospel and is really well rounded. And yeah, so that those books, and she has Expect to Win, Lead to Win, and there was a third book as well. So that is quite inspiring.
Yeah.
She's one of the top influential women of the world, so quite impressive in terms of her career path. So that, and to be fair, I never read fun books. I don't have any time for that. I do, as I said, inspirational, or for example, the airport I picked up, it's called The First 2 Hours. So it talks about how you can actually make sure in every day, your first 2 hours in the office, that you maximize what you do in them, and that's really for the strategic, the thinking, the uninterrupted time where
before the phone starts.
Exactly. So that's helpful, because you just always want to kind of saying, how can I maximize effectiveness? How can I squeeze more productivity into our busy days?
Yeah.
So I always look for something that just reminds me to say, what can we do better? This in incremental reach in terms of doing better.
Right. So would that be like marginal gains?
Yeah.
Excellent. And who inspires you?
Maybe it's old-fashioned, but I always do say my mother, because she's quite an independent spirit, and she has always said, don't worry what other people think. Just do what you think is right and follow your heart. And I've done that, and my parents have always supported me. It was very difficult when I moved to Canada, but they have always said, it's your life.
Yeah.
You need to be happy, and we're happy for you. So that's very meaningful. And as I said, my mom, spent the time home, so she stopped working and looked after us. But again, a very independent person that always wanted that her kids excelled and did what they felt was right.
Yeah, she must be very proud.
She is. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. And what's your favourite quote?
So yeah, that's it was just at the I had mentioned to you earlier, my son just graduated from medical school in Florida.
Yeah.
And at the graduation...
Congratulations to him and you.
Thank you.
It's a team effort, isn't it?
It is a team effort.
Yeah.
And the president of the university actually called it incremental reach, and it really means never being satisfied with just what you have done, but to say, I wonder if I could do a little more. And I like the thought about this incremental reach, because, if you just say, I'm here, but I want to be, really high up, it's too far, it's daunting. But if you just say, I could do a little bit of that, or I wonder if I could take that designation, that's really, and then over time you see that difference. And I've always tried that in my career. Like, I'm always learning, I'm always adding new skill sets. And at the time, it just feels maybe like a little diploma or something here. But when you add it all up over your career, it becomes quite impressive. Yeah. So I thought that was a good quote.
Yeah, it is. And where can people go to learn more about you and the work that the regulator's doing? And
yep. So I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, the authority has a LinkedIn account as well. Our website, is helpful. We try to do quite a bit of press releases and again outreach as well.
Yes.
Actually, on Friday we're at the Manx Museum, and we'll talk about our foreign PEP thematic as well. So we do try to be accessible, and again, it is a small island. People will know where to find me if they if they want to just ask us a question or me a question.
Yes.
I'm available to do so.
Yeah, I did do a web search for you and the regulator before I recorded this today with you, and something else I didn't mention, I just will at the end, but congratulations on your appointment to the SEF MC board, which is the board of directors of the Small Countries Financial Management Centre. That's quite an accolade.
Yes, and very excited to be part of that. It's a fantastic organization. So really looking at other small countries and then providing training programs for them.
Yeah.
So internationally, it has given us and continues to give us, a lot of accolades, because it is fabulous.
Yes.
And again, then good relationships internationally. As I said, really putting Isle of Man on the map in countries that otherwise would not, have any reason to know us and know about us.
And sharing good practice as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so it has been lovely. As I said, I joined in June of last year, but I'm really enjoying being on the board and helping that
that's
program.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I think that's about it for today, but thank you so much for spending the time with me today and recording this episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer and editor of this episode, Catherine Watts and James Spooner at Bear Content. And thank you for listening.